speakers, Lisa and Lynn, I first heard about them when I was working in the jail, the Santa Cruz Women's Jail. It was called Blaine Street, and it's a minimum security jail. Most of the women are there because they're there for drug offenses or minor offenses, other kinds of things that they've done that the law didn't enjoy. And I was teaching nonviolent communication, I was teaching substance abuse classes, and one day I came and the women were just really excited, and they told me about the speakers who had just come to the class, and not to the class, but to the jail. And apparently they had gone around to a couple of jails in Santa Cruz and were sharing their story, which I'll be sharing with you shortly. And the women, I've never seen them so kind of happy and animated, and they just felt like it was a wonderful, powerful story for them to hear, for their own lives, to think about forgiveness in their lives. And they were like, well, if they can forgive, my God, can I just forgive the little things that are bothering me every day? So forgiveness is a really, I think, important thing, and you might even be thinking in your own life, you know, is there anyone in your life that you either feel that you would like to forgive or you would like to ask forgiveness? And I think so much of forgiveness is just kind of an inside job, you know, to live a life of forgiveness, how important that is. So having said that, I just want to go back just a moment to talk about transformative justice, which is a class I teach spring quarter. It's a 3-unit class. It's going to be Thursday mornings. And it's really about how do we do justice differently in our own personal lives, in our community, in our society, in the world. How do we do justice differently? Because we live in a world which is, who's the bad guy, who did what, and how are we going to punish them? And transformative justice is more about how do we restore what was lost? How can we restore what was lost? And as we know, a lot of people who commit crimes were often people who themselves were some way violated against, not uncommon. So, you know, how can we restore them back into the community so that we can have trust, safety, and connection once again? So do consider taking that class if you have any interest in it whatsoever. So Lynn and Lisa, would you come on up here? And I'm just so excited to see you both again, and so happy that you're here to talk to Transformative Action students.
These are microphones.
Yes.
This is on. Can't decide like we're too warm or too cold in this classroom, so you may see me change at that age and stage, you know, warm, cold. Anyway, you know, we were talking about what a blessing it is, the way this class has always received us, and I just have to say I really appreciate that, the way I know you will receive what we're going to say. Our relationship is falls under the category of miracle, I'd say. You know, believe in miracles, you got to do it, because this is definitely one of them. But we wanted to tell you kind of where we came from, and so, you know, I just got on Medicare this year. I'm 65, yay, and it's working for me. Okay, I grew up just down the street here on the top of Laurent. I used to walk up Spring Street and meander into the fields where the cows were, and occasionally you'd see one with horns, and I knew it was time to get out. But anyway, so this is my territory. My brother probably has some more wild stories about the campus when it was just starting. So I went to high school, you know, graduated in '67. So all those high school years is when this campus was happening. So I feel really a part, in a way, of the very beginnings up here. So I graduated from Santa Cruz High and went on to art school, to Cal Arts. I really felt great with creating things, and my family and people really supported me in that. So that was my strong suit, not the academics. So I went and got a BA in Fine Arts. And I knew I needed to return home and reestablish some relationships here. My mother and I were kind of estranged at a time, for a time. And I remember writing, let's see, I need a guiding star. I wish I could find that piece of paper now, but So I arrived back in Santa Cruz looking for a job, and the job I got was at a chiropractor's office. And unbeknownst to me, that it was kind of a transformation of all the lives there. And the gal I worked with had trouble with her husband. She went away, came back, a believer in Jesus Christ. And she shared that with me, and that changed my life. And I received Jesus as Lord and Savior. This is an important part of our story because Jesus is, and our faith, Lisa's and mine, is the foundation of our relationship. And your faith may look different, but I just want to say this is the ground we're standing on, is the forgiveness that Jesus gave me at the cross. So I loved being, who I was and single, but then it got really old, and all I wanted was that Mr. Right, somebody to love. I had lived in LA for a long time when I was going to Cal Arts, and my theme song, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places, that's what I was looking for. So when I found, a stable love in Jesus and a church family, and then one day I sat right next to Mr. Right over there. Anyway, so it was 81, and we met on July 5th, and we were married in that November. I was 32, so I think I know what I'm doing. Anyway, so happily we had Amanda was born in 85, and Carrie, our daughter Lisa. And that was the joy of my life. I love being a mom.
My name is Lisa, and my background is completely different. I grew up in Watsonville, and I graduated from Watsonville High in '84. I have 5 older siblings, a mom that just did the best that she could with what she knew, and I grew up in a dysfunctional alcoholic family. My father was an alcoholic, died when I was in 6th grade. You were talking about the compassion, and I have to say, I was telling Lynn and Dan on the way here that on Friday, I got to take my mom out for a drive, and I got to tell her how much that I love her, and that I'm happy that she's my mother, and that she did everything for me that she possibly knew how to do at that time. And that's one of the things that I got to learn with compassion for others. So I grew up in that family, and I just didn't really want to be a part of. I wanted to do things my way. I wanted to do things differently, and that's exactly what I did. I left. I went all the way from Watsonville to Santa Cruz. So, and then one short year in between there, I had gotten pregnant, got married, and left. And I came to Santa Cruz and raised my child. I got into the grocery industry back then, and it was good money. It was a way of having medical expenses paid for my child and I raised my son. And so through that, though, I drug him through some things, because like I said, I wanted to do everything my way. And I did. I knew that eventually I wanted to be married and have more children, and I did that, and I always do everything backwards. So, well, not today, but I did then. And so what I did was I had met this guy of my dreams at one of the finer establishments of Santa Cruz, the 007. And we had 2 children, and then we got married. So my life looked a little different, and you know what, though? Everything inside of me, all I ever really wanted to do was go to school. That's all I ever really wanted to do. And so when I had the house in Santa Cruz with the hot tub and the new car, I had a lot of students that also worked for the grocery store, but I bartered with them for childcare. And so they would be able to come and use my home. They would be able to, hot tub with my child, and I'd be at work. And that's, they went on to become lawyers. They went on to become doctors. They went on to become something else, and I stayed in the grocery field. It just kind of stayed there. And so there was a part of me, too, that was unhappy with myself until I discovered who Lisa really is and what really Lisa is capable of. So, I got married again, and when I got married, things were crazy. They were crazy because of that sadness, because of the not wanting to feel. I learned how to cover that stuff up, and I did. And I used drugs and alcohol to be my friend. And through that process, I lost the ability to communicate. I lost the ability to feel my emotions and to know how to deal with them. Lynn's turn.
This is a tag team. All right, so 9/11 was kind of a lot of years ago when the Twin Towers were run into. You guys remember where you were then? What was going on? Well, that same year on the beach in Santa Cruz, Luis Palau, he's an evangelist from Portland, originally from South America, but he came to Santa Cruz to put on what he calls Beach Fest. So a big Christian outreach on the main beach in Santa Cruz. Anybody have any knowledge of that?
They would have been like 5 or 6.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years old. Somebody raised their hands. Okay. So this is where our life is going to intersect. So this is important. So Luis Palau, had worship bands. DC Talk was a Christian worship band, and skate ramps and stuff, and it was really wild and fun. So at this time of life, my family was Dan's working, Mandy and Carrie. Mandy now 16 and Carrie 14. So they're working, and Dan picks them up in the evening of Saturday, September 22nd, and comes to see me. I was already at the beach with this group and doing prayer, getting my heart ready and praying for people to come meet my Savior Jesus. And then Mandy, Carrie, and Dan arrived, and we enjoyed the beach. And the next day is Sunday, and we wanted to get home so we could go to bed and go to church. And our usual plan is not to pay for parking at the beach. We parked on the other side of the trestle and walked. So we did our walk home, walk back to the car, got in the car. But when we got to the intersection of Cayuga and Windsor, was it? Yeah. So we never made it because Lisa, driving a heavier car, T-boned our Ford Aerostar, and our daughters, Mandy and Carrie, sitting right behind us, died at the scene of the accident. I know this because I read the death certificates, which is hard to do. But so they didn't suffer, but they were gone, and we were unconscious, which is a blessing, a big blessing, because you don't want to experience that and have PTSD the rest of your life, right? So I praise God I don't have that. We woke up in Dominican Hospital, and me before Dan, I think, he had soft tissue damage, and I had broken ribs and pelvic bones, so a lot more broken bones. And that's where we heard that the girls were gone. But when you're on painkillers, it kind of sinks in, like a dream. A bad dream, but a dream. And slowly, though, Dan went home, and his folks came down to take care of him. And I was still in the hospital for another week. But eventually I had to face going home. In fact, they didn't even want to release me until I said, I think I'm ready to get me out of here, Because it was hard to walk down the hallway past my girls' rooms and just not look at what I didn't have now. Because I had to take care of myself. I had to heal. And so that's how we met in the intersection.
So September 22nd, 2001. So by that time I was married, had the 2 children, and my husband and I didn't have any communication skills. What we had was more or less of a relationship where we actually partied together. And in the midst of it, we were bringing up 2 children, and it wasn't healthy. It wasn't healthy at all. But we had been invited to a wedding. We had been invited to a wedding, and nobody wanted to babysit for us because they were just kind of tired of our stuff. At that time, he was really doing well in his business, and we thought that because we had material stuff, that we were productive members of society in which we were just existing in society. We weren't productive. We were just existing. So we eventually did find somebody to take care of our children that evening, and we went out to a wedding, and I dropped off my children at the babysitter's house, and our family vehicle left it there, and we took his sports car out that evening, went to the wedding reception, had some drinks there, and he had a construction business at the time, and I did like what the wife would do, and that is like go get the drinks for the guys, get the plates of food for the guys, and meanwhile, I was getting my own drinks. And I remember it was a beautiful evening, and we were getting ready to leave kind of earlier than anybody else, and it was a nice drive coming down the hill, and he asked if we wanted to stop at another place, and we did, and we had a drink there. Then we stopped at another place in which I used other drugs to mask the way that I was feeling. And so we stopped at the last place, which was the 007, and we ordered a drink, which I never drank, and it was almost 10 o'clock, and I remember him saying, let's go get the kids. And I thought to myself, yeah, let's go get the kids, but really in my head, I only heard one thing, and that meant like, let's get the kids home, get them in bed, and really get the party started. Like that's all I cared about was me, my selfish and self-centeredness. And so we picked up the children. We drove right by my house, and he said, do you want me to pick up the kids? And I said, no, I'm fine. And so he dropped me off at the babysitter. I put the kids in my car, and I was driving home. And when I was driving home, I ran a stop sign, and I T-boned a minivan. And at the time, I didn't know what exactly occurred other than I hit another vehicle. But I can tell you then that this is how my God works in my life. I can remember looking up, and I could hear sirens. I knew that I was under the influence of alcohol. I knew that I was under the influence of cocaine. I knew that I had caused this through my actions. I just didn't know how severe the action was yet. But I heard a voice, and this voice told me to get my children out of the car and not to look. See, my God knows me better than I know myself. So at that time, I took my children out of the vehicle, and I got them to safety across the street. And what I did at that time was that, I knew that I was under the influence. I knew that my life was unmanageable because all the sirens that I was hearing were coming for me. And at that time, I turned my life and my will over to the care of God as I understood Him. And what I said, and I don't even know if I said this verbally or if it was in my head, but it was heard, was that you are the only one that can help me, and I will forever be obedient to you. Show me, show me. And that's when I heard that voice tell me to get my children and to get them to safety. And I knew who was talking to me. I was met by a police officer that asked if I was the driver of the vehicle, and I said yes. At that time, my sister-in-law, ex-sister-in-law, lived down the street, and her husband was there. And they released my children to him. And so I'm very grateful for that. We went down to the hospital, and they started asking me questions, and I had never been arrested, so I didn't have any idea what was going on. I didn't know what random rights were. And so I kept asking this guy to repeat them. I didn't know that he was an investigator. And finally, I said, anything that I've ever seen on TV and anything that I have ever heard, I believe I need an attorney. And so he told me that I had invoked my rights and asked me to stand up. And so I stood up, and at that time, he turned me around and he slammed me against these lockers. And he whispered in my ear that I had just killed 2 teenage girls and that if he had anything to do with it, that I would never breathe fresh air again. I couldn't believe that. I could not believe that I could take other people's lives. Never once in my life did I think that because I drank or because I used that I was hurting anybody else but myself. I didn't know the magnitude that occurs when you do things like that. I didn't know. And I didn't understand like how I could be that monster.
Well, you guys, you have to know this is hard for us, to relive this, because we moved beyond that day. As awful as it was, really, for both of us. But there's more changes coming. This rocked our world. Our worlds were never the same again. Dan and I were broken physically and emotionally. Basically pretty numb for a long time. But our pastor was alerted, came to see us in the hospital, and I guess it was him that broke the news. Dan and I were so drugged up, it took us a long time to have it sink in. Going home, like I said, was really hard. Dan's mom was there, and she lost child to Dan's sister to leukemia at age 4. So we were grieving moms together, cried every morning in her arms in the hallway. And Lisa was, that woman, which she isn't anymore. We laugh about it because it's hard to. She was, it was like a disgusting, like exhale every morning came out of my mouth because, she was, as far as I was concerned, was a terrorist in the SUV. We see a suburban now. Oh, yikes, it's, cars are really our weapons, right? Our cars are weapons. And my one little piece of pleas to you is don't text and drive, all right? Distracted driving. It's worse than drinking, all right? It's worse than, as out of it as she was, it's worse. I read that because I had to do online driver school recently. So don't text and drive. So Dan and I were broken, and I had a walker because I was broken on this side, so I had a hump on my right leg. Praise God, they both work fine now. But Dan, I had bought jammies for my girls. Moms are hard to talk to, but moms are the tender heart. It was, September, we already bought Christmas jammies. So Dan says one day, let's go return those. I go, oh my God. So hopping into Bourbons, returning the jammies. And the minute I turned around, there was our pastor, Barney. And he hates to shop. This was a divine appointment for a hug that I needed very badly. Anyway, so it's what we have here, and that's why I say it's a miracle, because I can see tears in some of your eyes. You know how hard it was for me. All I ever wanted to be was a mom. I just loved being a mom. My girls were the joy of my life. Though they were, 14 and 16, approaching some difficult years, I missed all those years. So anyway, it's hard, but I get a lot from just looking at your faces today, and God supplied a lot of love, which I'll tell you more about my miracle grandbaby later.
So needless to say, I was placed under arrest, and I went to Water Street Jail. And on my way there, God puts people in places right, in the right timing, His timing. So there was this guy behind the wheel, a boy in blue, and he kept looking at me in the rearview mirror, and I was looking at him, and I kept asking him, is it true? Is it true? And he wouldn't say anything, and all he kept saying to me was that your children are fine. Your children are fine. And finally, when we got there, we got out of the vehicle, and I said, I need to know, is it true? And he said, yes. I said, but your children are fine. And I said, okay. And I went in, and I just couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that I could take people's lives, and I couldn't sleep or eat for 3 days, and they kept trying to give me medication, and they kept trying to make me eat, and I just couldn't do it. But I also knew, like, something that my mom had always told me was that, like, you know, you didn't need any type of medication. What I needed was to believe in Him. And so at that time, I told him, like, I'll eat. Like, I could hear my mother's voice, you know, and in that voice, I would hear, like, okay, like, don't take anything, and just tell him you'll eat, and I'll eat, you know, and I'll sleep. And I'm forever thankful, too, that I did that. I didn't know what a blessing it would be. I was out on bail for 6 months, in which I was able to attend some meetings. I was sentenced to meetings, and I had people surround me that didn't want to be around me. Now that's odd. So they judged me. They pointed at me. I had to be there. And finally, like in that literature that they were reading, I found myself, and it really didn't matter what anybody said, didn't matter how anybody looked. It just didn't matter anymore. It wasn't about them. It was about Lisa getting better. It's about Lisa trying to live with herself. Talk about forgiveness. My part of the story is that how does Lisa forgive herself so that I can go on with life? And that was the biggest obstacle ever, was to learn how to love Lisa for who she is, for all her wrongdoings, for all the right things that she's ever done, every single part of her. How do I love her? And I learned, you know, I was out on bail for 6 months. I got sentenced, and when I got sentenced to 7 years, 8 months in state prison, in which I served 85% of that. That's 6 years and 6 months. And in that time, I was able to be around others that were going to meetings like me, to be around others that were, you know, associated with the church, you know, and doing like things. And what I didn't find was somebody actually working a program to get to know who they were and telling their story, because people are so afraid that their story is going to be used against them. And so the healing process stops, right? It's like nobody tells what you're there for, nobody says anything, and you're walking around with a bunch of broken souls. A bunch of broken souls. Until I was able to work 12 steps with my sponsor via mail and a phone call once a month. And then I was able to work with other people. And through that process, I got to love Lisa, but it took a very long time. I just didn't stop. I just didn't stop before the miracle.
The night that Lisa was going away, because we were posted, we knew when it was going to happen, and Dan and I were walking around our neighborhood like 11 o'clock at night because we were thinking about her kids and grieving for her. And this was kind of the beginning of the compassion movement, maybe. I mean, we were really sorry for her in that her loss, nothing in this world right here, we know we're going to see Mandy carry in heaven, but nothing would change our situation, but we were sorry for her situation. And at one point, after she'd been in prison, Dan said, we need to let her know about Jesus' forgiveness. We need to write a letter. So he's the writer, I'm the talker in the family. He wrote the letter. And it had an impact, because she wrote right back, said, your prayers have been answered, and I have received Jesus' forgiveness. And in that letter, it began our communication back and forth with each other. And it went on for quite a while. At first, we were still writing in some of the numb level of our grief. Grief is hard work. If anybody is in it, It's exhausting. And finally we had to ask a friend of ours to write Lisa in prison. We didn't want to let go of her, but we had to take care of ourselves. And we had to, I read every grief book that people gave me, and I wanted to see how other people navigated their faith. Because I was asking God, what were you thinking? Really? Really? He knew me. What were you thinking taking Mandy, Carrie? And well, slowly I began to see that answer and kind of got to know who he was all over again by reading the scriptures. A fresh look without any, without the past. Dan and I would talk about kind of our rights, God should have done this, he should have done that. So we realized, Dan and I both, that this life isn't about us. And once you let go of that, it's not about you, then you can really look at the other person with compassion and love. And I think that's what happened with Lisa and Dan and I. And we're looking forward to meeting her. When she got out, we asked that we be notified, because we didn't want to bump into her accidentally in the small town of Santa Cruz. How'd I do? Did I forget anything?
They didn't want to bump into me at a grocery store.
Yeah. Where she works.
So while I was incarcerated, I picked up this book that had some exercises in it. And it was a 12 steps of women's journey. And so I'm working these exercises in the book, and they seem kind of funny, and like, look in the mirror every day and tell yourself that you love yourself, and or gather some leaves and let them go in the wind, each one of them representing something that you want to let go of. And okay, and you can read those types of things and never do them, and they will never work. And you can read those types of things, and you can go through the action part of it, and it's amazing. It truly is amazing. So even though I was going through the action part of it, particularly looking in the mirror every single morning and saying, Lisa, I love you, I didn't realize that I couldn't keep eye contact. And so I would look down. I shared a room with 7 other inmates, so there was 8 of us in a room. And we would get ready in like 15-minute increments so that we could all be released for early morning breakfast at 6 a.m. And there was a lady there at the time that was incarcerated for 25 years that would watch me every single morning, and I didn't know. 5 years had gone by of me looking at myself in the mirror and not being able to keep eye contact. One day I kept eye contact, and I didn't even know, but she started clapping her hands. And she said, you finally did it, Lisa. You finally did it. And I said, have you been watching me? And she said, every morning. Every morning. So if you ever heard the term, fake it till you make it, there's a good example. I was faking it and didn't even know it. So Lynn was talking about the writing. I was so happy to receive a letter because all I really wanted was somebody to know my heart and not just my action. I wanted somebody to know my heart, to know Lisa. And the writing was going on, and I was like overzealous. I wanted them to know what I was doing. I wanted to know what I was involved in. I'm not just laying around on my bunk, but I'm implementing programs, and I'm getting other people involved, and I'm working with people that had never worked the steps before, and it just got weird. Lynn was nice and polite, when she said that they just had somebody take over and write. Well, it just got a little weird, and that's the way it was. We started having a friendship through the mail that neither one of us was quite ready for. There needed to be more time in between. There needed to be more action, things seen and not just heard. So when I was released, after 6.5 years, I came home. I used to see my kids every 3 months. I'd see them 4 times a year. And so when I came home to, all I ever wanted was like to be around my children, and that was work, like to come home and not have a place to live. I was divorced within my first 3 months of being incarcerated, which for a woman is not unusual. It's different for men. But that's something that had occurred. So being able to come home and be with my children and having the courts eventually give them to me full custody was a blessing in disguise, but Lisa changed. Lisa changed, and my then husband did not change. So those things, come to light. Sometimes it's not about the other person, it's about what you're doing. And that's what I've learned. It's about how I walk my walk, and how I give back to others, and how I work with Lynn, and how I live my life to be a productive member of society. And in the steps of recovery, my amends is a living amends. So what that means is my life is forever going to be work, and it should be. It should be. This is what I do. I know that we come and that we meet, and I know that we'll be someplace else in a couple of months, and my work knows, and this is what I do. This helps me live.
So where we met was at her parole office. So you can imagine only seeing her mugshots in the newspaper, not very flattering. And we walk in with our friend Betty Lou, who had been writing. We needed a little support. It's a big deal. This is, 7 years after the loss of our girls, so we're used to not having them around. A lot of things have gotten easier. But walking into a parole office, sitting down, facing Lisa. But actually what we did first was hug her. So Betty Lou came and hugged her, and then I hugged her. And when Dan put his arms around her, he just shook like a leaf and cried. A lot of things came out at that meeting. A lot of release, a lot of, it was painful, but it was a new beginning, and you have to have new beginnings. It's the kind of line you got to jump over sometime. And the best part about it was the parole officer was a believer in Jesus like me, and he said this had never happened in the parole office where the victim and the perpetrator had met. So like restorative justice, working together. It was really neat, he said, because we all serve a God of reconciliation. So we were there to bring wholeness and reconciliation. It was just the beginning of what you see, now years later. How many years we've been doing this? It's just amazing what's transformed. So that's when we met her first face-to-face. Then we used to get together to have meals, and we compared notes years later. It was exhausting. We all went home and took naps because just facing each other was so difficult to do, so very difficult. So, sometimes things that take work are worth it, right? So we worked at our relationship, and today I can say that I care deeply for Lisa. As does Dan. She's engaged, and we're checking on this guy. And anyway, he's a little afraid to meet us. I don't know why. Anyway, there's a story with that. But it's fun. It's a fun thing. We've gone out to lunch and had our toenails done together. We do girly things when we can squeeze some time in.
They've met my children.
I love her kids. Her older son, by the way, went to high school with Mandy and Carrie, so he really got picked on that next week at school. But I'm proud to say that my girls' friends did not pick on him. They're his friends. So, in fact, George invited one of Mandy's best friends to the winter formal that year. So there was a reconciliation abroad there, just all the way around. So we met and we began, sharing our story first at, what was the name, the Unwed Mother's Home there by
Sienna.
Yeah. So, and when we met, we sat outside first and we prayed. And we really were on the same page, so much from the very beginning, because our goal was, to love, to value, for compassion. Really, each person in the world, each of you here is so valuable to God. You're such a unique creation. And we're just here to say that your life matters to us, and that's why we're willing to share our pain with you and the joy of our compassion now and reconciliation. It's really worth it. Whatever hard stuff's ahead of you, it's ahead. Let me tell you, I just have to say, there's hard stuff ahead. That's how life is. But you can do it. You can do it. Don't ever give up. Don't ever drink and drive or text and drive. Okay, that's my last speech.
So before Lynn and I met at the parole office, I remember the parole officer asking me if I was willing to do this. And I said, of course I was. That's what I've learned, is that instead of avoiding situations, but to be able to walk through them. And I have to laugh, because I always remember the song when you're a kid, and you can't go over it, can't go under it, can't go around it, gotta go through it. You gotta go through it to get to the other side. And so when I was gonna meet Lynn and Dan at the office, I didn't tell anybody. And the reason I didn't tell anybody is because anybody that I was around wanted to protect me. Because they were thinking about themselves and not about everything else that was going to happen. And so for me, I knew that I didn't want to talk with anybody, but I went for a really long run that morning, and I prayed while I was running, and I met them at the office, and I just thought, this is just the next step. This is the next step of life. What's going to happen is going to happen, but I don't have to live with the unknown. So we meet, and we reconciled right there, just through the hug, and seeing the physical appearance of one another, I believe, was just crucial. And since then, it has grown. It has grown, and I was afraid to share my children with them, because how do you replace something that is irreplaceable? I couldn't do that. So how do I talk about my children with them? How do I let them know my whole life and not hold back? And I just had to trust. And this is where my faith comes in. I had to believe in something bigger than me, which is my God, to know that this was the right thing to do and to go through with it. So I trusted and I believed, and I started talking to them about my children. And it was the best thing that I ever could do, because I wasn't being true to me. I wasn't being true to them. I was assuming. And through that was another process of the reconciliation, because it was really only half if I wasn't being complete with it. I had to be complete with it. I think that's one of the things that I have learned is we can't go halfway with something and think it's going to be okay. It's the complete thing. And also the time that is involved in knowing the appropriateness of it. There's some things that for some you don't want to hurt people. That's what I was thinking. I didn't want to hurt them by talking about my children. But then I realized that how are they ever going to know Lisa and my family? So I got to share that with them, and they were happy. They were happy that I did. They were happy to meet my children, and now it's getting a driver's license for my kids, ups and downs with their father. I can totally talk about it. I had the opportunity to implement the transformative communication yesterday. I went to speak with the father of my children, and he became very upset and was pointing his finger at me. And what I've learned is that I don't have to participate in that, and I can say, not raise my voice. Body language is a huge part of it. And so I didn't raise my voice. I asked him not to point his finger at me, that was not okay. And I never once raised my voice, and before I knew it, he was thanking me for being their mom and them having good grades. It took a lot of time and a lot of like knowing that I wanted to grab his hands and like hold him down, and that would just make things worse. And so I really appreciate you, Christine, about talking about the transformative communication, because it does work.
Well, I wanted to share something that was written on the door of our hospital door by a friend. It became kind of my baseline from the Proverbs, the wisdom book. It's Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. Because the only thing I could think about was the rest of my life, no children, no gifts, to be given, no jammies to be bought. All the things that I was never going to have, no grandchildren. So I wanted to tell you that I have a little baby in my life now. I have a car seat, don't I?
Yes, she does.
So the joy of a car seat. So I met this little baby. They needed childcare early in the morning, so she was not even walking. Now she's in preschool, and I pick her up, and she calls me to the other caregivers there. I'm Grandma Lynn. Such a joy. Got to cuddle her when she wakes up from her naps. Got to listen to her cry when she doesn't want a nap. Anyway, all the joys of being a grandma. Anyway, it's just wonderful. Their whole family has embraced me, and so we now have, family. Get to go to her third birthday. Listen, this is one of those God coincidences, we say. So Hayden's third birthday is on Mandy's 30th in heaven. That's just amazing. When her brother told me when her birthday was, I was like, just in shock. I couldn't believe it. So a lot of love there. Right across the street, we have two kids that we've known all their lives, and we're like grandma and grandpa to them. They don't call us that, but we're special. I took the little girl to see Beauty and the Beast with her mom the other day. It was so much fun. So God is really blessed me. My cup is full to running over. I think that's what, when you forgive, you let go, and you receive not what you thought you wanted, but what really is good that's coming towards you. And I thank God for it every day, that I have an awesome life, that I get to speak to you, I get to see your dear faces, and I get to be alive and enjoy life. And life is really good. And that's one of the things, my main thing, when I meet people that haven't seen me for a long time, life is really good. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Dan and I have an awesome relationship. We drew closer together. Loss of children often breaks up a relationship. We had no cracks in our relationship, and we just clung together like glue. And we have similar goals because we love God, and we're very happy. And thankfully, anyway, he's our chauffeur when we go places, and wouldn't want to do it without him.
So here's something funny about Lynn. She loves going into jail. Loves it. She loves going to Blaine Street and ministering to all the women there. She has all these, little friends that get out eventually, and they call her. And then I had to kind of school her a little bit. It's okay to have those friends. It's okay, like, this is what you look for. This is how you're not taken advantage of. But it's just so sweet. I'm like, oh, I have one of those people in my life, aside Lynn, that came into the institution while I was there, and she chose to stop doing what she was doing just so that she could be my friend when I paroled. And so we've cultivated that relationship, so I get it. I get it when Lynn has a friend that gets out from county jail, and I'm so grateful that I get to be a part of her life, because along that way, I get to tell her like what to watch for.
We're coming to that place where we're going to ask you for questions. Oh, yeah.
do right now is just take a couple of minutes and turn to a couple people next to you and maybe share how their presentation has touched you in any way, how it's living with you right now. And then we'll just take a couple of minute break, come back, and we'll have questions. So go ahead and turn to a few people next to you. Okay, good. Hopefully you had an opportunity to share a little bit about how that affected you. And this is an opportunity to, if you have any questions at all that you would like to ask to Lisa or Lynn, and Dan has joined them, so he's certainly happy to answer any questions as well. Is there anything you'd like to share? Okay, let's see.
Christine,
Oh,
I
yes.
would like to just say one thing, just to fill in one gap in case you're wondering why we had never met Lisa until the parole office, is that Lisa pleaded guilty in court, and we never had to go through that awful part of our life. So we never actually did it. So we always thank Lisa for pleading guilty and keeping us out of it. So
Something is playing. Some audio.
So, audio is playing in the background? Oh, I see, yeah. Could you go up and turn it off? Thanks. I'll just talk louder. Andrew, raise your hand, just handed me this book. It's a book by Desmond Tutu, and it's called The Book of Forgiving. And it actually highlights Lynn and Lisa's story, and Dan, of course, in the book. I guess you were interviewed for it or something, so very, very cool that, and you know, I'm imagining most of you know who Desmond Tutu is. He started the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa after apartheid, and really helped to heal the country, really, after the civil war that they had there. So, Sydney's got a microphone, and she's willing to come around, and if you have any questions, please raise your hand, and she'll come to you.
Did you guys do a restorative circle at all? Or you guys didn't do any restorative justice?
Nothing formal. I think at the parole office, it was the beginning, and then because we're instructed in scriptures, says, the Lord's Prayer is pretty, forgiving is part of the Lord's Prayer. So it was something we wanted to do, so maybe the parole officer helped to begin with, and then we tried to be very brave and go out to lunch together. And we just kept meeting, and people, on the 10-year anniversary, we were in the newspaper talking about our relationship. We got a lot of invitations to speak. So it's been very organic, really good. Though I have seen the cards, to kind of understand how you're feeling. What are they called? Grok cards. Anyway. Oh yeah, I love the Grok card. So but I'm still learning. In fact, we've done this forgiveness thing, but then I read forgiveness books. Like, what have I really done? So there's more to learn. So thanks. That's a good question.
Watching your interaction looks very natural and organic, like you said. At the beginning, did it not feel very natural and awkward?
Yes, it was very awkward at first, but we pressed through. Yeah, Marie Callender's tell us about that.
Oh, our very first lunch episode. We ate slowly and we talked. And what had happened for us in the beginning when we first started doing talks is that Lynn and I would both, she said it rather lightly, but we would get sick. We would get sick to our stomachs, and we would go through the process and we would get through it. And about the third time that it had happened, I picked up the phone and I called her and I said, do you get sick afterwards? And she said, yes, I do. So it was very emotionally draining, physically draining. Getting sick to our stomachs, it just, it took a lot out of us. But I knew that if I just kept going through it, that would subside. So what you see today coming off as natural and easy really was a lot of work. And we just said we wanted to feel better, we wanted to live, we wanted to share our experience. And a lot of it is the forgiveness that we wanted to share with everybody and the reconciliation, because often for me, there are things that I get upset about or I want to be right about. And I have to remember, like, wow, Lisa, you've really gone through all this stuff, and I'm human, and I still get upset over the smaller things in life. Like, how do I forgive somebody for not paying me back $100, or whatever it is, or counseling out on me, or I want to say ruining my trip. Whatever it is, how do I get through it, and how did that affect me in such a manner when I've been able to go through something so huge? Oh, well, it happened because you're human, and now you haven't forgotten, so let's take a step back, let's look at it, and what am I supposed to do, and what's my part?
Yeah, I've been doing a little reading recently, and I think it's in Smiley's book, DNA of Relationships, and he says, couples having issues, you have to put yourself in the picture. What's your part? I just love that, put yourself in the picture.
Anything else?
So Lynn had mentioned, like, in order to see a clear path or plan, you have to let go of yourself, and in your case, you trusted in God. And then Lisa mentioned some parts about how you have to love and trust yourself. So I'm kind of like in this time, and I'm sure other people are, where we're like starting to create our own paths, but there's that voice that's like, are you doing this because you want to be selfish, or are you doing this to kind of create your own and value yourself, like your new identity or your own self? Do you know what I'm saying?
You probably all have something to say to this, but my thought is, a motivation, I think, is the bottom line for me. What motivates me? When Dan and I decided that our comfort in this life was not God's plan for us, just our plain comfort, then we saw that discomfort was okay, and we could invest in that, and whatever we had to go through. So I think forgetting yourself, can't really very well truly do that right, because you have all these things that you've been raised with, likes and dislikes, and even the desire to be heard is something I really wasn't as a child, wasn't really heard. So the fact that you're all sitting and listening to me it blesses me deep inside, an empty place. So all those things feed into looking ahead, and for me, remembering how much God loves me and loves each of you is what motivates me.
It sounds like it's something that being true to yourself, and I don't know about like any personal stuff or family stuff or a situation that might be occurring right now. There are some things that I check on, and that is, am I doing this to fulfill myself only? Am I doing it to protect myself? Do I have compassion for other people? So there's like a little checklist that I go through so that I can say like, oh, okay, this is the right decision, and it's okay. I'm not hurting anybody else. It's okay for me to have a life. It's okay for me to do certain things. just as it was like in my mom's situation, like it was okay for me to pull away, but then it's okay for me to have compassion for her and understanding for others. And sometimes we don't fit into their box, I want to say, into your family's box. You know, this is how we expect you to be and what we expect out of you. In that respect, there's an expectation. So I try not to have expectation of others, which is really hard. Sometimes people have an expectation of me, and I will never live up to anybody else's expectation because I'm not them. So it's being true to yourself inside and maybe having a little checklist of who you are and how you don't want to hurt others and what's going on in their life.
Any more questions? Or comments?
So, it seems to me like you guys have had just the biggest test of forgiveness that there is. And I wonder if this ability to forgive that you guys have had, if it has changed the way you respond to any situation in life, such as someone, you gave someone $100 and they're not repaying you. Has your instinctual response changed? Instead of yelling at them or wanting to punch them, is it, how do I forgive instead?
Getting right to it. What I've learned is not to act on my first instinct. Right? That's all. That's all that I have learned, is not to react. And that my first thought is wrong. So take a breath and breathe. I had something really huge, I thought, in my life occur where I planned a trip with a friend that had paroled from prison. And I had made this promise to her that I would go meet her mother with her, and her mother was from another island, and that the meeting point would be in Hawaii, and she was going to come from Micronesian islands. So in that process, I saved, because I came home first, I saved for this event to take my children, to take myself, and as a friend to follow through with that. In the midst of it, she met somebody and asked if this person can come along. And I said, you know, I don't see any harm with this. Let's go ahead and try it. And we did, and we booked all our flights. And as it turned out, it was like, oh, sorry, we don't have room for you and your children, but we have room for him and her. Right? So it was a chunk of money for me, and I have to remember, it's like it's only money. Like, how can I compare that to what occurred here with Lynn and I? Really, you know, that stuff you can replace. Yes, my feelings were hurt. You know, yes, I was upset about it. No, I don't have to engage in that party again. You know, so those are real life things, and those are things that I have to think about. Like, wait a minute, at least it sounds huge, but how huge is it, really? You know, it's money. Money comes, money goes. And I know it's really hard when you're a starving student, because I came home, I had nothing. And I was a starving mom for a little while until I got on my feet and got things going. I think in that respect, it's like what I've gone through and what things come up today, I just have to take a step back and think it through, and you know, but yeah, I'm human, I'm gonna get mad.
Yeah, forgiveness keeps on happening. It's one of those gifts you get to keep on practicing. That's all I gotta say. You gotta keep on doing it,
Yeah.
especially if you live in this island, you know. So it works.
I just have to say, my fiance always says, I just want to hear you say one time that you're wrong. So I said, yeah, I'm wrong. So, can I hear you again? It's life. It's life on life's terms. Any other questions?
killed even, and, you know, think about how that has affected you, maybe how it's affected them. I mean, I think about Lynn and Lisa and Dan, and I think, well, okay, so what's the alternative to what they did? They've chosen that path of forgiveness. What's the alternative? Yeah, Lisa could live a life of shame and guilt and stuff it all, you know, and maybe continue the lifestyle she had. And Dan and Lynn could continue to be in a place of hatred and resentment and isolation. That's a path they could have chosen. How fun would that be? You know? So they chose something different, and they chose to open their hearts and to invite Lisa in to their heart and to their lives. And everyone, I believe you know, I think healing, it's a journey, you know, maybe not a destination, it's a journey of healing. It's this journey of healing that they initiated, and they did it through their faith, you know, and I think there's other ways that, you know, some of you have other faiths and maybe some of you not at all. This was their path, and they share that.
I want to say that.
Yeah.
This past New Year's Eve, my fiance and I had gone out to a dance. It's a clean and sober dance. So we were at this dance, and there's a gal that has been watching my path, so to speak. And yeah, I was out there dancing. I don't get out much, right? Because I'm usually at home with the kids and just want to be at home. So when I do, once or twice a year, like I want to dance. And I could see in her face, like, how is she enjoying herself? And like I knew it, you know, I knew it. And what I know today was that it's okay for Lisa to have fun. It's okay for me to go ahead and dance, because Christine said, what's the alternative? I like to look at it like I wasn't put on this earth to be sobbing and not to enjoy the moment that isn't put in front of me. I believe that I was put on this earth to be somebody, to help somebody, to show somebody, whether it was just through that dance, that like you don't have to sit there in your stuff, your baggage, whatever it is. It's okay. And later she came up to me and I whispered in her ear, it's called forgiveness.
Wow. It's powerful. I did want to share one other thing with you, Lisa, actually, and I think Athena, when she spoke earlier, alluded to that. There you are. She alluded to that in the Transformative Communication class. I actually designed an exercise. I should call it the Lisa exercise for my students, because you know, it starts with self-forgiveness, doesn't it? It starts with self-forgiveness and self-love and self-compassion and self-acceptance. That's where it all starts. So we have a little exercise we do in that class based on your mirror exercise, really, you know. And I've actually, it's in the book too, I've actually done it myself, you know. It's like, look in the mirror. Can you say I love you? And not somebody going, oh, that's baloney. I've been known to swear in this class a few times. So, yeah.
I just don't swear in front of Lynn and Dan.
Oh, good.
Our halo.
So, any more comments, questions? Yeah.
I have a question. It's mostly for Lynn, but I also applies to Lisa as well. Do you think that if you guys never formed this relationship, that you would still be able to forgive Lisa and Lisa yourself, like fully? Let's say, like it just didn't, the parole meeting never happened or something like that.
Yes, well, I think you can forgive somebody that's already passed away. I mean, that's a process. It's my part. And I actually worked through that, forgiving my dad for different things. He's gone. So, yes, you don't have to meet the person that you're forgiving. And sometimes it's not safe to do that, you know. But the forgiveness is for you. This is not my quote, but it's somebody's quote. Unforgiveness is a poison you drink thinking it's going to kill the other person. Okay, so I don't want to poison myself. My desire in life is to have joy, a lot of joy, and I find that through forgiveness. And I like Desmond Tutu's book. I think you should get it. I hear it's coming out paperback. When is it?
In May.
Okay.
There's also an online forgiveness course you can take that kind of walks you through the
Yeah.
process.
Here, Lisa's done that.
So there's a forgiveness challenge online. When this book was launched, they had the first forgiveness challenge, and when it came out, was actually the same time that had occurred with the trip. So I did the forgiveness challenge online, and it was great. It's a 30-day challenge, and I hear that there's going to be another 30-day challenge when the paperback comes out. So if you just Googled it for the Desmond Tutu Forgiveness Challenge, it should pop up. Okay. Looking for any more hands? Okay, so we have a few more minutes then, and Lisa reminded me that I often show a video of a cop talking about restorative justice, and she liked it, and so we're going to end the class with that. It's about a 5-minute video. And if you, always of course, chairs at the end, but if you have any questions or anything about a portfolio, please check in with your TA or myself. So I'll sign off here, and we'll look forward to seeing you all Thursday in class. And thank you again.